I have not asked for a single program which did not cause one or all Americans some inconvenience or some hardship or some sacrifice. But they have responded, and you in the Congress have responded to your duty. And I feel confident in asking today for a similar response to these new and larger demands. It is heartening to know, as I journey abroad, that our country is united in its commitment to freedom and is ready to do its duty.
Kennedy, too busy with other crises at the peak of the Cold War, had assigned a task force regarding Iran's affairs. This task force contained mostly young idealist hotheads such as Robert Comer and Kenneth Hansen, well known for their excessive anti-Shah position. What they had in mind was to micromanage Iranian politics, administration, and military affairs, meaning running the country from Washington in an American fashion, which the Shah did not accept. Julius Holmes, the U.S. ambassador to Tehran, also supported the Shah strongly on this. Nevertheless, during those years of guessing games with Washington, the Shah introduced his bloodless white revolution, which to this date still looks advanced, progressive, and ahead of its time in principles, especially when compared to other backwards movements called a revolution.
With the implementation of the vast program of social and economic reform to which we have set our hands, and with the self-reliance which springs from a strong and ancient nationalism and faith in the rightness and integrity of our cause, Iran will advance in the right direction. With the support of our friends, the great country of America foremost among them, who take their stand on the same front with us and share in the defense of the same ideals and a similar way of thinking and living, we shall pursue our course.
The Shah had to wait 8 years for Nixon so they could together work on plans that they had envisioned years before. These were the years that the White House realistically listened to the Shah, and the benefit was mutual for both nations. The landslide victory of Richard Nixon in 1972 for his second-term presidency was nothing but good news for Mohammad Reza Shah. After all, he had another 4 years in hand to take his nation to the next level of progress. He could start the next move in the international stage, bringing awareness to the industrial world about their addiction to the cheap energy source of developing nations.
We have got to really friendly warn the world that you will better find other sources of energy, because not only it is going to run dry in another 30 years, but it's almost a pity, almost a crime to burn this precious oil to heat houses or to light electrical bulbs or even run trains, when you have what we know actually 10,000 derivatives in the petrochemical field.
Nixon understood that the price of oil, set in 1958 at $2.50 per barrel, was not reasonable, considering it had not increased again until 1973, even though the price of all imported commodities of the oil exporting countries had gone up every year since then. Nixon also knew that to prevent communism from spreading into that region, you needed a strong Iran with the strong leadership of the Shah to defend against it. The Shah was feeling lucky that with Nixon in the White House, progress in Iran could be expedited. Then, the unthinkable happened. The prelude to the Iranian Revolution.
The easiest course would be for me to blame those to whom I delegated the responsibility to run the campaign. But that would be a cowardly thing to do. I will not place the blame on subordinates, on people whose zeal exceeded their judgment, and who may have done wrong in a cause they deeply believe to be right. In any organization, the man at the top must bear the responsibility.
The Watergate scandal that ended Nixon's presidency and led to the arrival of two other inexperienced novices into the White House. First, Gerald Ford, perhaps an accidental president who replaced the resigned President Nixon. Gerald Ford started a mixture of hidden and open war with the Shah, apparently under the assumption that a victory over the Shah on the oil price hike, regardless of its dire consequence for the Shah, for Iran, for the stability of the region, and for world peace, would improve his chances of being elected in the 1976 presidential elections. Then Jimmy Carter arrived with his unseasoned team, unaware of the realities of the world, with his own dream of going into history books as the one who defeated communism by creating an Islamic green belt, and with his selective human rights advocacy that nurtured the seeds of the Islamic Revolution in the most unlikely country of the region, Iran. The last two presidents indeed hammered the last nails into the coffin of a friend who took side with the United States from the beginning of his kingship, hoping together they could bring peace, freedom, and prosperity to the Iranian people.
America gave us generous and valuable financial and military assistance, thus greatly facilitating our task in the implementation of our vast economic and general development and security plans, for which I wish to express to you our deep gratitude and sincerest thanks. We are absolutely certain that the freedom and security of peoples around the world, as well as your own security, depend upon the will and determination of the American people to continue with the struggle without flagging. We hope that you decide, as you have in the past, that it is worthwhile. But I can assure you that whatever your decision may be, that the people of Iran have not maintained their freedom for 2,500 years in order to now surrender.
There has been no moment in recorded history when the Middle East was without strategic importance to the major powers of the world. Of these nations, one of the most important is Iraq's neighbor to the east, the state of Iran. Her strategic importance undiminished, Iran is one of some 35 friendly nations to receive U.S. military aid since World War II.
During the Kennedy administration, an agreement was requested by the United States pertaining to the status of their U.S. military personnel in Iran. A legislation later called the New Capitulation Law by the Shah's opponents.
All communication was conducted in Farsi.
Salam. Salam. Salam.
Salam.
Salam.
سلام.
این چیست؟
این چیست؟
این چیست؟
این چیست؟
این چیست؟
بله، ما هم درسمان را یاد میگیریم.
بله،
ما هم درسمان را یاد میگیریم.
بله، ما هم درسمان را یاد میگیریم.
همه شاگردان درسشان را یاد میگیرند.
همه شاگردان درسشان را یاد میگیرند.
همه شاگردان.
This was resisted and delayed by two different prime ministers until 1964, when the Pentagon pushed Hassan Mansour's government with so much force and persistence to pass this ill-advised and unnecessary legislation through Iran's parliament. On October 13th, 1964, this infamous legislation passed narrowly in a hand-picked parliament, in disguise and among other legislation, 70-61, extending full diplomatic immunity to all American military advisors, personnel, and their families within Iran. A forced status agreement that clearly violated Iran's sovereignty, reminding Iranians of the infamous capitulation law in the early 1900s, and a bitter history of humiliation during the Qajar dynasty. The capitulation law, later abolished in 1928 by Reza Shah, an event proudly documented in history as a great achievement for regaining Iran's sovereignty. The unanswered question is why? Why would the United States push strongly to weaken the position of an ally in a time when the Shah had not yet solidified his power, and both the US and the Shah were constantly bombarded by the propaganda machine of the Soviet blocs? There may not be a logical answer for this question with the common wisdom of uninvolved people. Iraj Pezeshkzad, Iranian writer and researcher, emphasizes that this unwise push by America turned Khomeini's image from a fanatic clergy who is opposed to any progress overnight to a nationalist whom he never was. In fact, the animosity of Khomeini against the Shah, which led to his unsuccessful uprising in 1963, came as the Shah launched the White Revolution of King and People. The White Revolution contained many progressive reform principles, such as women's right to vote and the right to be elected. Which Khomeini and many hardline clergies were relentlessly opposed to, considering it to be against Islamic values. The White Revolution also detailed Iran's land reform, which gave ownership of land to millions of peasants. And created great animosity against the Shah from feudal landowners who made an unsuccessful alliance with certain branches of clergies to turn back the clock. A year after the crackdown of Khomeini's first uprising, with his anti-progress messages, a grand opportunity was presented to him on a silver platter, this time by the US government. Khomeini was informed of this military agreement by a mysterious source, which remains unknown, and contributes to the widespread idea that foreign forces back Khomeini, supporting him with intelligence and money for years and for a purpose. Whatever the justification, the consequence was giving Khomeini an opportunity which he was looking for all his life. To be listened to, not just by a relatively small religious fanatic group, but by a much larger part of society, who now looked at him as a national figure. A wave rider as he was, Khomeini immediately seized the opportunity by declaring on the Shah's birthday that the independence of Iran is gone, and asks, "Are we now a colony of America?" He cried, "Majlis has approved the document of our slavery," while blasting and insulting the US and the Shah. Khomeini was immediately arrested. His life spared by the Shah, but sent to exile in Turkey, then Iraq by Prime Minister Mansour, who was assassinated shortly after by Islamic extremists connected to Khomeini. Pezeshkzad writes, "The last memory of Khomeini, after his exile, in the minds of many people, young intellectuals in specific, was his cry for Iran's independence and sovereignty. This served as a cover for all his previous reactionary slogans and backwards demands. A genie was out the bottle, and it was all for nothing. Or was it for nothing?" Some claim that the revolution of 1979 would not have happened if an event in August of 1953 had not happened. This may be true, but not by their reasoning. Since if the historical event, known as August 19th, 1953 had not happened, perhaps to begin with, a sovereign country named Iran might not have even existed in 1979 to have a revolution. The story of the 28th of Mordad has been misrepresented by various fronts, and the fact has changed throughout the years into a wrong assumption that it was the battle of Dr. Mossadegh and Mohammad Reza Shah against each other, or democracy versus dictatorship, that ended with the overthrow of Prime Minister Mossadegh and the triumphant return of the Shah after 3 days of self-exile in Rome.
Persians think that by nationalizing oil they are going to get rich. Unfortunately, the reverse will be the case.
برخلاف اصول و مقررات منشور ملل متفق خودسرانه نسبت به یک قوم صلحجو و طرفدار عدالت و دموکراسی مجازات‌های اقتصادی تعیین کند.
The fact is, back then the collective wisdom of the Iranians decided that with no disrespect to Mossadegh, he was not able to salvage a bankrupt economy and at the same time stop the communist takeover of Iran, represented by the Tudeh party. In their collective wisdom, Iranians determined rightly that for this Herculean mission, Mohammad Reza Shah was perhaps the only option. Collective wisdom does not mistake idealism with realism. Even the clergy, namely senior cleric and speaker of the House and Majlis, Ayatollah Kashani, took his side. So they, the people, brought the Shah back. And by bringing him back, the Shah felt they gave him a mandate to be the chosen king, something he took very seriously all his life. Maybe too seriously, though.
یک بار دیگر سپاس متقابل من به شما ملت ایران.